Hello and welcome back to Schlyde into Sports, live on 103.1 FM on WVLP Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Schlyde, aka Schlyde, and here we typically talk about the rules and regulations of college sports and their trickle-down effect that they have within each of the different sports. During the summer, college sports is kind of on the back end simply because, well, school's not in session. So there are still college sports stories that do happen over the summer. Not necessarily about athletics, but about coaching movement, player movement, and the transfer portal. The gambling story, like with Brennan Sorsby, which we talked about last week. But this week, we're going to be talking a lot about World Cup. We are approaching the last slate of games for group play. So we're going to start looking ahead to round of 32 and going into how the qualification process works since the playoffs for World Cup did expand. So there is a little bit of debate online, at least for which teams are getting in, and we're going to get into that later. And a lot of the news today is going to be NBA related. Dusty May is heading over to coach the Dallas Mavericks, which is a huge surprise after a few months ago, he coached Michigan to a national championship in his second year. So absolutely insane absolutely insane to see. There's also a big trade between Miami and Milwaukee leading into the NBA draft, which is starting today, actually at 8 p.m. So we're going to talk a little bit about that kind of leads into the other thing that we're going to be talking about today, which is the NBA draft. And one of the dramas, I should say, that's kind of related with the NBA draft, which maybe isn't so dramatic once you look at it, but we'll find out together. But we're going to start off with this Dusty May story. So Dusty May is going to be the new head coach of the Dallas Mavericks. He cited that the reason why he was going to go to the Mavericks to coach, so making the jump from college to NBA, which, by the way, is something that you don't really see that often anymore. He made the jump because of the atmosphere of college sports right now. He said that he wasn't really able to celebrate the national championship that Michigan won because basically 15 minutes after the national championship game concluded, he was already being asked about the transfer portal and all that stuff. So there's just no break even when you win a national championship. So a little bit annoyed there, or at least, he was a little bit annoyed about that. And, not only putting together a roster in college sports, but also keeping a roster together is very difficult because, as I've talked about on previous episodes, the NCAA does not really enforce their rules. And one of the things that has been happening quite frequently is other coaches talking with players on different teams, trying to get them to go over. A few months ago, I did bring up the story about Pete Golding talking to, I believe it was a defensive tackle from Clemson, and poaching him from Clemson, and Dabo going all in on Ole Miss and Pete Golding when that did happen. That is kind of essentially what I'm talking about there. The tampering that the NBA or that the NCAA does not really enforce all that well. I mean, they couldn't even enforce the gambling thing with Brennan Sorsby. So how on earth are we going to expect them to enforce tampering rules? I don't know. That's beyond me. But they're going to have to get something fixed. It seems like they're maybe trying to work on how to get that fixed with the Senate and the House, but not really sure how long that's going to take. It's definitely not going to be done by this summer. It's not something that happens overnight. So, yeah. But with Dusty May becoming the new head coach of the Dallas Mavericks, he replaces Jason Kidd, who was the now previous coach of the Dallas Mavericks. in this draft, which again is starting tonight, Dusty is going to have access to 2 first-round picks going into this draft. And frankly, I think that is going to be a huge advantage for Dusty and the Dallas Mavericks because he either coached against or coached a lot of the players that are in this draft class. So Dusty already has a lot of analysis on each of these individual players already because he had to have that. So, or at least when he was coaching at Michigan. So now he can basically just refer back to his notes. So expect maybe the unexpected from Dallas in this draft. I think the projections might be a little bit different since Dusty is now going to be coaching at Dallas. His input in the picks for this year's draft is going to be very crucial. Not just because he's coaching, not just because he's coaching the team, but also because he has the experience of coaching against some of these players. He's going to be able to look at these players in a different light than the other coaches that are on the other NBA teams. So I think it's going to be a very interesting draft to watch simply because of Dusty May going to the Mavericks. This also is like I said before, a really rare career move. He's the first NCAA men's basketball head coach to leave for an NBA job immediately after winning a national championship title since Larry Brown back in 1988. That is really a long time ago. I mean, that's like basically 40 years ago. That's 40 years ago. And then regarding the Michigan legacy, during his brief but wildly successful 2-year tenure at Michigan, he compiled a 64-13 record, which, as we all know, accumulated in a national championship victory over UConn. So it seemed like, for Dusty, it seemed very out of the blue for me. Like when I first looked at it, I'm like, what is he doing? Why is he going over to the NBA? But, looking at like the press conferences, like I'm not on the inside of Michigan at all. I don't really know what goes on within the college at Michigan. I don't really have access to what Dusty is saying behind the scenes, but based on what I've seen Dusty say at press conferences, how he interacts with the media regarding certain questions, especially about the rules and regulations, like with the transfer portal and all that stuff. He just seemed over it almost. Just kind of taking into account his overall demeanor, it just seemed like he was kind of over it. Even in the post-game press conference at the national championship, he just seemed done with it. Michigan did bring in a haul in the transfer portal, and that was also part of the reason why I thought he was going to stay. Because, one of their big pickups in the transfer portal was Estrella from Tennessee. He was arguably the best player in the transfer portal, and he went, I'm pretty sure, expecting to be coached by Dusty, and now Dusty is gone. Since a new head coach has not been publicly announced yet, we're not really going to see any sort of movement with the transfer portal right now. And even if there was a new head coach that was announced, we still wouldn't know simply because there's a 5-day gap period before the transfer portal opens. So that gives the new incoming coach a chance to talk with the athletes that are currently on the team. After that 5-day window, then the transfer portal opens for, I believe, 15 days. However, if Michigan does not publicly announce a head coach within the next 30 days, or I guess now 29 days, because this story broke yesterday. So within the next 29 days, if Michigan does not announce a new head coach to take over, like not an interim head coach, but a head coach, then the transfer portal, the 15-day window will open immediately on the 31st day, or in this case, the 30th day, since we are already over by 1 day. So it really depends on when the school makes a decision on who the next head coach is going to be. Now, if I'm Michigan, I'm obviously trying to find a replacement as soon as possible, because if you don't, I think that is going to make the players a little bit more annoyed with University of Michigan, maybe trying to take advantage of the 30-day window, giving the players less incentive to stay, in which case some players might leave just out of spite and annoyance of the process. But I think Michigan, they should be able to find somebody pretty quick. They have a really solid roster on their team, thanks to Dusty developing the players that are there, and also thanks to the pickups that they made in the transfer portal. So there is a very solid roster there for Michigan. They just need to find the right guy to take over, but they need to do it as soon as possible, ideally. And not to mention the facts that if the longer you wait, the less time the coach is going to have with the players, which is going to have an impact on the season when it starts in November. So, the more time the coach has with the players, the more that they're going to be able to, get everybody to gel together, get the system going, all that stuff. So, yeah, as of right now, the interim head coach for Michigan was announced as Mike Boynton Jr. He was a assistant coach under Dusty, so Michigan just promoted one of his assistants. That might not be a bad move just to keep him as the head coach. I mean, the players that are there know him. I don't really know how much Mike had on, how much of an impact Mike had on the recruiting of the players that came from the transfer portal. Obviously, when people are being recruited from the transfer portal, they don't only just talk to the head coach, they also talk with the assistant coaches and everybody else that's involved on the team. They talk to teammates, they talk to possible future teammates. There's a lot of voices that are involved in the process in bringing people in for the transfer portal. Maybe Michigan keeps Mike, the players in the transfer portal, maybe they like Mike enough to stay, and Michigan doesn't have to risk losing anybody. That would be maybe Michigan's most ideal scenario. Do I think that is probably going to happen? No, probably not. I think either one or the other is going to happen. I think what probably will end up happening is Michigan will find somebody else. They'll poach somebody else, and whether it's from the NBA or college, they'll find somebody and have them be the head coach. And then we'll see more movement within the transfer portal. Or what'll happen is Mike will stay. The players that don't want to stay will go. I'm really curious to see what Estrella is going to do, because I do think that he went mostly because of Dusty. But one of Michigan's star players from last year, McKinney, has already announced that he's going to be staying at Michigan despite Dusty leaving Michigan. So I think that is going to be huge in terms of keeping players that are there, or players from the transfer portal there, or keeping people from entering the transfer portal. But yeah, this is just a really unfortunate situation for Michigan basketball for obvious reasons. I mean, it's just really kind of upsetting. If I'm a Michigan fan, I'm obviously very upset, but I'm not a Michigan fan, so I don't necessarily have to be upset. I can be happy for Dusty making the jump to the NBA level. I think he will probably do great there. I mean, he's kind of like Signetti in the sense that wherever he goes, he just wins. So really curious to see what Dusty does with this upcoming year in the NBA. Having young talent like Cooper Flagg, working with a veteran like Kyrie Irving, and then having 2 first-round picks in this year's draft, which, as I've said before on previous broadcasts, is a very stacked draft class. There is a lot of elite talent to pick from this year. So I think Dusty is going to make a really good first impression on the NBA, and maybe if he does make a good enough first impression, we might see more of an exodus from college basketball going into NBA or professional basketball, simply because the professional environment is a little bit more tolerable, I guess, in a word. I mean, that's pretty much all I could really put it as, but yeah, I mean, I think also there is kind of the thing that makes me a little bit nervous for Dusty going from the college level to the professional level is that in college it's more about development, the development of the players. This is something that Nick Saban has said about college football, and why he was able to succeed in college football and not NFL was because he liked developing the players. When you get to the professional leagues, NFL, NBA, you don't really get to develop those players because they're already going to be developed at that point. So really curious to see how this goes for Dusty, because I think this could go really well, or it could completely backfire on the Dallas Mavericks completely, depending on Dusty's skill set, because obviously Dusty can develop players and he can develop them quickly. It's just a matter of being able to do it at the professional level and being able not necessarily to redevelop players, which, I mean, in some cases, yeah, you do kind of have to redevelop players, but I think it's more we are going to need to figure out whether or not Dusty's system that he's bringing with him from Michigan to Dallas is going to work. Maybe Dusty changes his system up a little bit. Who knows? But it is really intriguing either way. I mean, this is definitely a move I was not expecting to see. When I first saw this story, I thought it was fake. I'm not even going to lie to you guys. I thought this was a fake story when I first saw it. So, yeah, moving on now. Still in the NBA, we're going to move on to the Bucks Miami Heat trade. And this is something that was kind of anticipated, not necessarily between Milwaukee and Miami, but with Milwaukee and another NBA team, because it's been pretty clear the past couple of years. Giannis has been unhappy with the Bucks and how they've been doing things. And honestly, and this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I think Giannis is a little bit of a drama queen. He dramatizes a lot of things, in my opinion. And maybe that's just me, but just the way he reacts to certain things, I just am not a huge fan. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a great player, especially on the front court, but it just seems like he is a bit entitled, kind of a part of the old culture of NBA. I mean, we're kind of entering a new culture with Jalen Brunson kind of bringing this on, where there's a lot less entitlement and more, taking pay cuts to bring in the teammates that you want to bring in to create a system that works. I think that is kind of more of the approach that works, and we've seen it work in football as well. I mean, you look at Tom Brady, dude is constantly taking pay cuts to keep guys on his team that worked well with the system. Even when he went over to Tampa Bay, I mean, you look at Gronk. Like Gronk was a veteran player. Like, he was gonna require a big paycheck, and Tom Brady is was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at the time, if not the best quarterback in the NFL. But you're not, like, you're only as good as everything around you is. So sometimes taking that pay cut is good. But some of the players, like, you look at LeBron, you look at Giannis, and they're constantly chasing the paycheck, they're chasing the money, and that's not going to lead to long-term team success. And you look at the NBA playoffs this year with New York and the Spurs, both teams had deep benches. They were both young, relatively. I think the Spurs were younger than the Knicks, but both teams were still pretty young. But they both had strong benches, and that was able to propel them to the NBA Finals. Not necessarily just the star power. Like in this day and age in the NBA, you cannot solely rely on 1 to 2 players. You have to have a deep bench. And that's what kind of worries me, at least for Miami, picking up Giannis and Bobby Portis in this trade, because they gave up Tyler Hero, Kello Ware, who has been playing pretty well with Miami, Jamie Jacques Jr., Kasparas Giacchionis, along with multiple first-round picks, the 2026 number 13 pick, 2030 pick swap, and a 2033 second-round pick. So Milwaukee received a lot in this trade. I don't necessarily think either team really benefits necessarily. It seems like both were trying to address different things. It seemed like Milwaukee was trying to address their bench with this trade while also kind of getting rid of Giannis in a way. And Miami wanted more star power, but in turn gave up a lot of their key pieces and their future, essentially. So I think short term, we'll probably end up seeing Miami in the NBA playoffs next year. Very early prediction from me, but that's just kind of the way I see it right now. I think Miami will probably end up making it to the NBA playoffs, whether it be as a play-in team or as maybe a 6 or 7 or 5 seed. Not necessarily higher than that. I think they probably make it to the second round at most. I don't really anticipate Miami making it very far in the playoffs. They're not going to have the bench to make it as far as they want to go. Milwaukee, they could maybe sneakily make the playoffs this year or this coming year, but I don't think it'll be this coming year. I think it'll probably be the following year where we see Milwaukee start to make some moves depending on how they draft. If they draft well, then they're going to have a very deep team. I think Milwaukee probably should try to take the Oklahoma City route, draft some good guys, invest in the draft capital, and go from there. I mean, you look at the success that Oklahoma City had in the past 2 years. They got an NBA championship, and they also made it to the Western Conference Finals in 2 years with the team that they had. So I think the youth of the NBA is kind of looking more like the future. So I think in the end, Milwaukee ends up winning this trade, despite giving up Giannis and Portis. So yeah, that's just kind of my take on that trade right there. For the draft board, so just kind of looking at the picks. So for tonight, Washington is going to have the number 1 pick. Then you've got Utah, Memphis, Chicago has the number 4 pick. The Clippers coming at 5, Brooklyn at 6, Sacramento at 7, Atlanta at 8, Dallas at 9. This is definitely, again, like I said before, this is going to be a pick to watch. Then you've got Milwaukee at 10. I think that's another one that we're going to need to watch as well. You've got Golden State at 11. That one could also be very interesting. You've got Oklahoma City at 12. That's huge. I think Oklahoma City kind of needs this draft pick because they are going to have to end up giving up one of their guys on their roster because they're approaching their the end of their rookie contract. You've got Miami at the 13 pick. Charlotte's at the 14th. Chicago is at the 15th pick. So Chicago has 2 top 15 picks. That is going to be something to watch, especially for us, as Northwest Indiana people. Memphis at 16. That's also a big one as well. Oklahoma City at 17. Charlotte at 18. Toronto at 19, Spurs at 20, Detroit at 21, Philadelphia at 22, Atlanta at 23, New York at 24, Lakers at 25, the Denver at 26, Celtics at 27, Wolves at 28, Cleveland at 29, and Dallas at 30. So there are some teams that are definitely going to need to draft really strong this year. Again, kind of pulling in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City has the 12th and 17th pick. That is huge, especially for this draft class. Oklahoma City could set themselves up to become the future dynasty. Obviously, with the past 8 NBA championships, it has been different teams every single time the past 8 years. So we haven't really seen a dynasty set in since the 2017 Golden State Warriors. So Oklahoma City, with this draft, they have the opportunity to set that up, maybe take back the NBA championship next year, and then win it the following year, winning it 3 times in this decade. The Bulls, they've got 2 top 30 picks. This is a great opportunity for the Bulls to kind of get back into it. Haven't been relevant the past decade since Derrick Rose. So this, again, a great opportunity for Chicago to kind of, get back into the playoff picture, or at least, outside of the play-in picture. I think, who's the other team that has? Oh, Charlotte. That's the other one. Charlotte is also the other team that has. Charlotte and Memphis are the other 2 teams that have multiple draft picks. So they are going to need to go in pretty strong. I think, depending on what Washington does, I don't necessarily like having the number 1 overall pick, but I think if you pick really anybody that is projected to be in the top 10, I think is a safe pick for Washington. But yeah, personally, I'd much rather have like the 3rd or 4th pick, or 3rd or 4th pick, simply because I like trying to see what direction everybody else is trying to go. And, sometimes the direction that some people go is not the direction that you think they're going to go, or that you want to go. And at least in the case of the NBA and NFL drafts, picking lower is cheaper. So that's also something to consider as well. So, yeah. I guess the last thing before the break, just going to talk quickly about Darren Peterson. So some of you guys might have seen that there was a little bit of a story going on where Darren Peterson was not training with the Jazz, despite the Jazz's interest. So the Jazz is the number 2 team on the draft board. But this is not like the Shedeur Sanders situation where he would purposefully botch interviews because he didn't want to be on a certain team. It sounds like, based according to this ESPN projected draft board, it sounds like Peterson is interested in the Jazz, but he's just not training with them because he anticipates that he's going to be the number 1 pick. So he's been primarily focusing on training with Washington. So I think it will be interesting to see. I mean, we'll be able to kind of gauge more if this is actually true based on his reaction at the draft. I mean, I think there's no question really that he should be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft, but it's just a matter of where he falls. If he does fall number 1, does Washington kind of take the risk with an injury-prone Darren Peterson, or do they make the safe pick with AJ Debinsta or Cam Boozer? Those are 2 picks that Washington can go for as well. That would be equally as good, if not better. But I think it will be interesting to see Darren Peterson's reaction if he does get drafted to Utah at number 2, because then we'll be able to confirm whether or not what ESPN is saying is true. Because, you can say one thing and be like, oh yeah, no, I don't I don't mind a certain team. I don't mind the Jazz. But then, the second you turn your back or the second that you do get picked by the Jazz, you're like, oh, I don't know about that. But, yeah. All right. So after the break, we're going to talk World Cup and, talk about the round of 32, the teams that are in, and I guess how to get in to the round of 32. Because of expansion there, the rules are a little bit different. So that being said, we're going to take a little bit of a break and hear a message from our sponsor.
This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schlyde at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com.
All right, so World Cup. There's been a lot of craziness that's been going on in the World Cup, including Canada booing other teams' national anthems and making the other teams upset, as well as USA winning 2 out of 2 games in group play, solidifying first place in Group D, which is huge. This is the first time, I think this is only the third time in history that the men's USA team has won 2 consecutive games within the World Cup. So this is a huge achievement for this USA team. They beat Australia 2-0 without Christian Pulisic, a.k.a. Captain America. So USA kind of on top, maybe. Maybe USA wins. I really like the way that USA has been playing. I think Germany is also a very dangerous team as well. That is another team that has solidified first place within Group E. They're looking very dangerous, especially after that 7-1 victory over Curacao. They got a last minute goal over Ivory Coast to solidify that first place victory. They're currently 3 points ahead within their group. Same thing with USA. USA is ahead of Australia by 3 points within the group. Other teams that are looking really good right now, neither of these teams has solidified first place. These 2 teams are tied for first place, and both these teams are kind of favorites going into the World Cup, or they were favorites going into the World Cup this year. You've got Group I, you've got France and Norway, both tied at 6 points apiece, dominating Senegal and Iraq within their group. France and Norway are going to be playing later this week. That is going to be an absolutely electric match. This is going to be Holland's first World Cup, and he has just been dominating the entire time. And Mbappe is on a revenge tour. They could very well win it all. I mean, this match between those 2 teams is going to be absolutely bonkers. Another team that solidified first place, and to be honest here, this should not really surprise anybody, is Argentina. They are ahead by 3 points within their group. In second place within Group J is Austria. So Argentina has 6 points. Austria has 3. Algeria also has 3. And Jordan is also in their group, but they're effectively eliminated from contention for a spot in the knockout round. And a group that I guess I kind of passed up was Mexico. In Group A, Mexico solidified their spot in the World Cup knockout rounds. They're also ahead 6 points, 3. South Korea currently in second. Then you've got Czechia in third with 1 point, and South Africa tied for third with 1 point as well. But because of the goal differential, technically South Africa is in fourth because Czechia has a -1 goal differential. South Africa has a -2 goal differential. So that's the huge difference there. So, like I said before, there is kind of new rules regarding how the play-in works for third. So essentially for third, the 8 best third place teams make it in. Now there's 12 groups. So the third place team has a pretty decent shot at making it in. However, it's not a guarantee. So I made a little TikTok last night about how who was it? It was in a pretty chaotic group. It was in Group H because Spain drew to Cabo Verde, and Uruguay also drew with Cabo Verde. Uruguay has 2 draws, 0 wins to 0 losses, and so does Cabo Verde. So in the TikTok, I essentially said that Uruguay could be out of the playoffs unless they beat Spain, in which case Spain could also be out of the playoffs. But since Spain has 4 points, and because it's the 8 best third place teams, Spain is actually in a great position to still make it into the playoffs, even if they lose to Uruguay. So it's going to be very tight. It seems like Group H is probably the tightest group, or maybe the deepest group, I should say. You could make an argument for Group I as well, just looking at it plainly, but I do really like both those groups. Group A could be a sneaky group. South Korea is a very interesting team to watch play. They're very precise the way that they play. They mainly lost to Mexico because they were a little bit too patient with the ball, and Mexico scored kind of early. So it was just kind of an unfortunate situation for South Korea, not to mention the fact that they were also playing this game in Mexico at Aztecia. So it was a pretty huge home field advantage for Mexico there. But South Korea is still likely to make it into the knockout rounds. But like I said, even though there's a tie between Norway and France for first, they're technically not on the bracket yet because there's different ways that that it could play out. Like there's specific spots depending on where you finish within your group. So there is no guarantee. The reason why I bring this up is because if you go on FIFA's website to look at the standings, it'll have both France and Norway in green, indicating that they're both going to qualify. But because neither team is solidified in a certain place, whether it be first or second within their group, they can't be put on the bracket because that is still due to change. That is still up for change. So if you are following along on the FIFA website and also looking at the schedule on Google or the bracket on Google, hopefully this explains the confusion. But going back to how the best ranked third place teams will qualify. So how that's going to work. So it says the full list of 8 best teams among those ranked third will be confirmed by FIFA on the 27th of June. So that's going to be kind of towards the end of the week this week. Those teams will be determined as follows. Greatest number of points obtained in all group matches. So like I said with Spain, this is why I think Spain mathematically has a good shot to make it into the knockout round, despite, maybe being third if they lose to Uruguay. Now, Uruguay obviously has to, not Uruguay, Cabo Verde has to win their game. So it's not necessarily a guarantee that Spain is going to be third, but there is a possibility that Spain could finish third within their group. But if they do finish third, because they have 4 points, they are likely to move on. They would have one of the higher number of points. So that would be one of the tiebreakers that would move them forward. Then you've got the goal difference resulting from all group matches. So that's goal differential. So that would be like kind of going back to the standings here. If you're looking at the FIFA website, there's the GD, which is goal differential. So that can be a positive number or a negative number. So that essentially means if you score 3 points to a team, but you give up 2 points, then that's 1 point. And then that adds up over the course of time, or over the course of the group play. Then the third criteria, greatest number of goals scored in all group matches. So that's number of goals. So number of points versus number of goals is different. So points is kind of more based off of wins. You get 2 points for winning, 1 point for a draw, and I think -1 for losing. Or 0 point. No, you get 0 points for losing. But goals, obviously that's a little bit different. That kind of more has an impact on the goal differential. But it doesn't really but the greatest number of goals scored doesn't take into account the goals that you gave up. So this would just be 1/2 of the stats from the goal differential. So it's essentially just goal differential minus the goals given up to opponent. Then the fourth criteria, you've got the highest team conduct score, players and team officials relating to the number of yellow and red cards obtained in all group matches. So looking back at some of these matches that have taken place so far, some of these teams have accumulated red cards. Belgium accumulated a red card in their match against Iran on Sunday when they drew 0-0. You look at Paraguay. Paraguay, they beat Turkey 1-0 in Group D, but they have a red card. That could impact whether or not Paraguay makes it into the round of 32 or if they don't make it to the round of 32. Because again, those penalties are going to be taken into account. The less you're penalized, the better. Qatar obtained a red card after losing 6-0 to Canada. Bosnia obtained a red card after losing 4-1 to Switzerland. Both Bosnia and Qatar are in Group B, so that is going to shake things up in Group B alone. Both those games were on Thursday, June 18th of last week. And I believe Mexico and South Africa both obtained red cards in the first match of the World Cup, not even just their first match of the World Cup, but the first match of the World Cup, where Mexico won 2-0. Now, this has less of an impact on Mexico because, like I said before in the broadcast, Mexico is already in the knockout rounds because they solidified first place within Group A. South Africa, however, they're not solidified. And if we go back to the standings, they're currently in fourth in the standings behind Czechia. And they're only behind Czechia because of the goal differential. So South Africa, they would need to win their game, which is tomorrow. They need to win their game tomorrow against South Korea and do it in a pretty convincing way. Now, I don't think South Africa is going to be able to do it. Like I said before, I really, really like the way South Korea plays. They are very calculated. They dominate time of possession with the ball. I like it when teams dominate time of possession with the ball. Time of possession usually indicates greater number of opportunities that the team is going to have. So I think South Korea will probably end up winning against South Africa tomorrow at 8 p.m. And South Africa will likely not make it to the knockout rounds. That is just one of my bold predictions there. But yeah, and then the last thing is the two or more teams still equal on points shall be ranked according to the most recent published edition of the FIFA Coca-Cola Men's World Rankings. So essentially, it depends on where you're ranked at the end of the day if you are equal in points, even with the yellow and red cards accumulated together. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, you look at some playoffs where, you talk about doomsday scenario. I mean, college football is one of those playoffs where you can speak a doomsday scenario into existence. And since this is the first time FIFA has expanded the World Cup, I'm going to be very curious to see if we can speak a doomsday scenario, or if anybody has spoken a doomsday scenario into existence. I mean, you look at the last year before the college football playoff expanded from 4 teams to 12 teams. People were talking about a doomsday scenario where Florida State wins the ACC championship without Jordan Travis and without their secondary backup quarterback. And Alabama winning the SEC championship. Texas winning the Big 12 championship. And that does end up happening. And it left the committee in a very, very difficult position. And I'm very curious to see how that's going to play out with the World Cup. Now, I don't think there's going to be as much controversy because they have a pretty well laid out foundation to determine which of the third place teams are going to make it in. But there are still going to be people that are angry that their team does not make it in for whatever reason. So it really depends. Again, I'm really curious to see how this all completely plays out. It could play out terribly. It could play out nicely, but yeah. So just kind of talking a little bit about teams that are eliminated and why. There's one team in particular that I'm going to be talking about kind of towards the end of this discussion, but teams that are eliminated effectively as of right now. I did already say in Group J that Jordan was eliminated. They have 0 points. They have a goal differential of -3. Like they're effectively eliminated. They're not going to get past Algeria. Other teams that are eliminated, you've got Tunisia. They have a goal differential of -8. They got absolutely killed by Japan and the Netherlands in their games. It's just not been a good run for Tunisia this World Cup at all. Japan and the Netherlands are actually tied for first, but they don't have green next to their names on the FIFA website because Sweden is 1 point behind them and mathematically could still take that first place position based on points. So it's a very tight race in Group F, excluding Tunisia from that discussion. Then you've got Turkey, and this is the one that I really, really wanted to talk to you guys about, which we'll get back to them in a second, but they're behind Paraguay and Australia by 3 points. They have 0 points. Goal differential is only -3, but the thing that I'm going to talk about at the end is what's really going to shock you. So now the last team that is again effectively eliminated as of right now is Haiti. They have 0 points. They cannot pass Scotland with only 1 game left, and that is why, because Scotland has 3 points currently, and a win only gets you 2 points. So Haiti can't even get into the third place position. That's why teams normally are mathematically eliminated, because at this stage in the world, or at this point in the World Cup, for a lot of these teams, there's only 1 game left in group play, and if teams have 3 or more points, you can't go minus in the points because those are based off of wins and losses and draws. So you effectively, you can't catch up. You can't catch up. And looking back at the requirements to be one of the top third place teams, one of the first tiebreakers is the points. Based off the wins and the losses and the draws. So I guess too bad, so sad for the teams that are eliminated. Sorry, that sounded terrible, but oh well. But Turkey, going back to Turkey. So the reason why this elimination is absolutely insane is because Turkey was, they were projected to win Group D. They were projected to win the group, and they're in last, and they're eliminated, which is shocking. But you look at the goals. You look at the goals for, which just essentially means that the goals that they scored so far in the group play. They've scored 0 goals. They've scored 0 goals this whole tournament. And what's even more shocking about this is the fact that they've taken 62 shots on goal in their 2 games and scored none. They scored 0 goals after 62 attempts. I mean, that is just absolutely terrible. I mean, I've gone on and on about some teams and why they lose, like in college basketball, looking at some of the stats, like if a team goes 3 for 20 on the 3-point line, or I don't know, 4 for 25 on free throws, or something like that. Just being like, well, if you made your free throws, you would have won. But in the case of Turkey, I mean, this is just even worse. I mean, at least if you're going 4 for 25 or 2 for 20, at least you're getting more than 0% of your shots in. I mean, come on. What is going on with Turkey? I mean, apparently they don't have a quality 9th person. Like they have a solid 8-man roster, but they just never really figured out who their number 9 was. And now it's just as a result of that, they are 0 for 62 in their shots, and they're now going to be going up against us, USA, who's on top of the group, has not lost a game in the group, and has scored 6 goals already this tournament. I mean, come on. Come on, man. It's too much. It's too much. But yeah, I mean, looking at some of the other groups, you can kind of tell which ones are tighter versus which ones are not. I mean, you just look at first place. Like Canada is first place in Group B. They have 7 points. Switzerland, they're in second, and they have 5 goals. Both Canada and Switzerland are tied in points because they both have the same number of wins and draws. But goals for, I mean, accumulated between both those teams is 12 goals versus the combined total of 3rd and 4th of Bosnia and Qatar with 3 combined goals. I mean, that they've scored a 4th of the goals that Switzerland and Canada have scored. So I think either one of those teams could maybe shake things up in the tournament that could leave some unsuspecting teams in peril. I mean, then you look at Group C, Brazil, Morocco, they're both pretty close. Morocco, more of a recent World Cup success after making the semifinals last year. Brazil, a more traditional, historic power within the World Cup after accumulating a World Cup of their own. Scotland has just been kind of a fun team within the group. They're 1 point behind both Morocco and Brazil. Scotland, the funny thing with Scotland is the people that went to the Scotland fans that went into Boston, they drank the city of Boston dry. That was pretty hilarious. And just watching all the social media clips where they're going from statue to statue within the city of Boston, and they're putting orange traffic cones on top of their heads. And American citizens that live in Boston are removing the cones, and the Scottish people are putting them back. And it's just been this kind of fun banter-ish thing that's been happening. And it's been, again, just absolutely entertaining. Look at like USA. USA is head and shoulders above Group D. Then you've got Australia and Paraguay, who are essentially equal, and Turkey is they're just inside the earth. They're just rock bottom. Rock bottom is Turkey. And then you've got Germany. I mean, you look at the goal differential, 9 goals. I mean, 9 goals. That's Ivory Coast has scored 2 goals. They're probably solidified at second at this point. They could maybe tie for second or third, but with the goal differential, their goal differential is currently 0. Ecuador is at -1. Curaçao's at -6. So I'm really liking where Ivory Coast is right now. Ivory Coast has a really solid defense. That could be a team that could surprise people. They almost surprised Germany when they played in the group play. So I think Ivory Coast is one where they could present a danger to whoever they play. They could easily be underestimated. Then Netherlands and Japan and Sweden. I mean, all three of these teams have scored 6 or more goals within their group. And I'm sure it's probably because of the absolute demolition of Tunisia that these teams have put on. Netherlands and Japan both scored 2 goals apiece against each other. So Sweden has just been kind of the other punching bag, despite also having scored 6 goals, which I'm sure a majority of them are from against Tunisia. Then you go to Group G. This one, also shocking, because Belgium was one of the best teams, one of the top 10 teams going into this tournament. And they're in third behind Iran and Egypt. And their team conduct score is absolutely terrible. Their team conduct score is a -7. I mean, come on, -7. Their goal differential is 0. They're tied with Iran in goal differential, but the reason why they're below Iran is because of the penalties. Is literally because of the penalties. So we could see Iran move on to the round of 32, which that's been a whole thing as well because of the whole war that had or has been going on. I'm not even sure if it's still going on anymore or if it is. It changes by the day, but they left a note in the locker room in LA basically just saying thank you for hosting us and all that stuff, which I thought was kind of cool by the Iranian team. I thought that was a nice gesture on their part. It still kind of sucks for them that they, have to travel back and forth within the day that they play. I mean, they basically have a handicap because of what has been going on outside of the world of sports, which sucks for them, but there's not really a lot that they can do about it except play through it, which is exactly what they have been doing. And, because they're toughing it out and playing through, they're second. They're second in the group standing and are likely going to make it to the round of 32. And then we already talked a lot about Group H. Goal differential is very close. Uruguay, Cabo Verde, both at 0 goal differential. I think that is going to be fun to watch. I really think that Spain-Uruguay game is key, especially for Cabo Verde. If they want to make it in, they're going to need to have a very solid performance against Saudi Arabia, though, in order to really solidify themselves to make the World Cup, especially as either a third-place team or a second-place team. I don't think they get first. They could maybe get first, but I don't think it's likely. Uruguay would probably have to win. But, yeah. Even if, well, maybe not, because I think Cabo Verde would only be able to get to second, because right now Uruguay has them in the penalties, which is one of the tiebreakers. So if they're both tied at 4 apiece, then Uruguay would still be on top, despite the tie that they had earlier. Senegal, Iraq is relatively close in goal differential. In goals against, really. They've both let up 6 or 7 goals. Kind of not great for either of them. But, yeah. Those are really the tightest groups, and just kind of looking at the most dominant groups. We're going to see who comes out on top. There's going to be games going on today. Portugal is playing today. They're going up against Uzbekistan. You've got England versus Ghana, Panama versus Croatia, and Colombia versus Congo. With that being said, that is all that we have time for today. If you jumped in mid-episode and you want to go back and listen to the beginning, just kind of listen to what else is being talked about, you can go on Spotify, Patreon, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Millions.co, and other podcasting platforms to listen to more. And we're going to be following World Cup more throughout the summer. With that being said, Schlyde out.